Good evening everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is to celebrate the contributions of Sri Manohar Parrikar, where every year FINS has been having a Manohar Parrikar Memorial Lecture. The first one was delivered by General Rawat, our first Chief of Defence Staff. The second one was delivered by Dr. S. Jaishankar, who's our current External Affairs Minister. The third speech was delivered by General Khandare, who was then the military advisor to the government. He is currently the advisor to the Raksha Mantri. And we have him today. So thank you so much, General Khandare, to take out time and being here. Today's session, we are very, very fortunate to have Nitin Gokhale, who worked very closely with Manohar Parrikar ji, who's an author and a biographer of Manohar Parrikar ji. We also are extremely fortunate to have Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, again, I don't need to give much of a background for anyone who's present today. He was the first one from the military to set foot on Siachen. Siachen being the first time that India actually acquired territories for a very long time. And I don't think we have done it after that, have we? We haven't. And finally, the keynote address will be delivered by Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhari. Thank you so much, Air Chief Marshal, to be here and to deliver this lecture. We keenly look forward to your lecture. As we usually do in FINS, we start our sessions with Vande Mataram. So I'll request Anushka to start Vande Mataram, and I would request you all to stand up for the national song. Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam, Sufalam, Manayat Shitalam.
भारत माता की
जय. Thank you. I would now request Sri Nitin Gokhale to come and share his view on the book that he has written and on his various interactions with Manohar Parrikar ji.
Thank you, Jayjit. Good evening, namaskar. What do I say about the man who actually changed the entire approach to the Ministry of Defence, the way it functions, the way the armed forces have opened up in the past decade or so. One man, if he has to be given credit, of course the system has played up, but one man who needs to be given credit is Mr. Manohar Parrikar. Like I have said it at various places and I have written about it. In fact, my tribute to him on the day he passed away, tragically at a very young age for a politician, on 19th March 2019, was something which was heartfelt, and that continues to be an inspiration for me in the sense what I wrote that time, and that translated into the book that I wrote and published in 2021 in the middle of COVID. It also got translated into a Marathi edition. It is called Manohar Parrikar, Brilliant Mind, Simple Life. And it contains not just his stint in the MOD, which was just 2.5 years in his 64 years that he was here on this earth, but his entire journey from childhood to becoming India's defense minister, and how, as a worker, as a political worker, social worker, and how he graduated from being that to Goa's chief minister, opposition leader, then again chief minister, and how he was offered the post of defense minister. So my mind goes back to our first meeting, which I have described in detail for those of you who don't know. It was a very peculiar kind of a thing. He used to call everyone, and anyone in this room who has interacted with him will tell you that he would call personally on his mobile, from his mobile to your mobile. And his mobile never displayed the number. It was unknown number. I was in Baroda, and I get a call from this unknown number. And I thought my friend in UK, who when he usually called once in 6 months, also had the same unknown number flashing. So I said, "Hi Raja, how are you?" He said, "No, this is not Raja, this is Manohar." So in a very stern tone, I said, "Who Manohar?" So he said, "Parrikar." So I said, "My God, I'm so sorry." He said, "No, don't be sorry, my number doesn't display. So obviously you don't know." So I said, "So please tell me, what can I do?" So he said, "No, I want to meet you." So I said, "I am away, I will be back in Delhi in a couple of days." He said, "Okay, couple of days means it will be Saturday. Why don't you come and have lunch with me on Sunday in Kota House?" I didn't know, I had never met him before that. And I had no reason to go and seek his appointment. Otherwise, as a defense journalist, I should have. But as coincidence would have it, I had left NDTV, my working life that time as a reporter, had ended, day-to-day reporter, just 2 days before he took over in Delhi as defense minister. So I had said, in fact, one of my colleagues in Bombay, that time in NDTV, Tejas Mehta, he had told me, "Why don't you go and meet him?" I know him from my days in Goa reporting. Very approachable, very nice man. You'll like him. And maybe, you can hit off. I said, "Look, I have no need because I'm not going to be doing any reporting anymore. So I don't need to." So I kept away. So this was January of 2015, our first call when he called. I went and met him in Kota House. I thought, that time OROP, all these people were busy calculating OROP. General Kandare, General Kulkarni, all of these people were trying to calculate the exact amount to be given in one rank, one pension. So I thought maybe he's wanting to get some inputs from me. So I took a one-page note for him, tentatively went to Kota House for lunch. He read it and he kept it aside. He said, "Okay, we'll look at this." But he said, "Tell me one thing. Why is the South Block so full of suspicion? And suspicious behavior all the time?" So I thought about it because I had not thought about it that way. I said, "Maybe it's a legacy the British had created and it continues." He said, "No, I want to change that. So give me suggestions on that." But anyway, let's have lunch first. So that's where I got introduced to his rice and fish fondness. And simple man, as I have described it, that's why simple life, brilliant mind. His personal staff in their shorts, carried from Goa, which they had come to him and come with him. They were sitting around with him on the dining table and having lunch as you would have lunch at home. And that's exactly what he did in his bungalow when he got that 10 Akbar Road, where he finally found his official residence. So whenever I went there, and it would be sometimes at 6 in the morning at his call, or sometimes 10:30 at night. But then after 2-3 months, when I got a little more comfortable, I said, "Your house here reminds me of boys' hostel," because all of them are in their shorts and t-shirts when they are in the house. And if he had his way, probably he would have also been in his shorts and t-shirts. He was that informal. He missed his Goan life. So he would come home, and in fact, I have described it in the book, 17th of March 2019, in fact, 2017, when at my place we were having dinner. All of these people were there, General Kulkarni, General Kandare, Marshal Dev, I think there was Satish Ratnaparkhi, all of these people, and coincidentally all Marathi, all 3 stars serving in various arms of the armed forces, the military. And then he called. He said in Marathi, "Kuthe hai? Where are you?" So I said, "I'm at home." He said, "Let me come and have a beer." I said, "Well, it may be a little awkward because these serving people are there and they may not like it." He said, "Doesn't matter, I'll come." So he came. And that turned out to be a memorable evening for 2.5 or 3 hours, where he recalled his entry into politics, how he came about taking up the job of leader of BJP in 1991 at the behest of Pramod Mahajan and Gopinath Munde, and how his wife protested vehemently when he announced that he is going to be the Lok Sabha candidate for BJP in 1991. He lost, of course, didn't lose the deposit for the first time BJP candidate. So his wife said that it's not on because you had told me you will not go to politics, you are an RSS worker. So he said, I made a compromise with her and a promise that I will bring BJP to power in 10 years and I'll quit politics. And sure enough, he did bring BJP to power in 2000, 7 or 6 months ahead of what he had promised. But tragically, his wife had passed away a month before he became the chief minister. So that's the kind of stories that he had shared. And then, of course, later, many times he used to share what he finds different from being a politician, an IITian, first IITian to become India's chief minister. So what 2-3 takeaways from his life and his functioning. One is that he was multifaceted, but he had a phenomenal memory. And my first formal interview with him was for Bharat Shakti when I decided to launch bharatshakti.in, my portal, which was supposed to be, which does support India's quest for self-reliance and defense. And I was trying to pin him down that let's do an interview. And he would find no time in Delhi. So he suggested that you fly down to Goa. There was the India Ideas conclave of India Foundation. He said, you come there. And on our way back, I'll be flying in my military plane, MOD plane. We will have 2.5 hours absolutely free of any disturbance. So I went there, and sure enough, he kept the promise. On our way back, we spoke for 2.5 hours. He didn't have a scrap of paper in his hand, but he did tell me everything about that he was planning about the procurement process to be changed, the methods that he wanted to be changed, and the transparency that he wanted to bring to the functioning in the MOD. Strategic partnership, for instance, in procurement, many other changes. Today, believe me, that interview, if you go back and read, 10 years ago, he did this interview in November 2015, 9 years ago. It is like a policy document. And for 2.5 years, that man didn't refer to a single document. Everything was here. So that was one. Second was he could read a file and remember almost every word of it. So there are several other anecdotes which I will not get into because right now it's not the time. But the other thing was, I have said this a number of times, that his greatest strength and asset was that his simplicity, his humbleness, the humble nature that he reached where he was. In fact, he was criticized by some of the veterans in uniform for wearing sandals and slippers, sandals for a formal guard of honor, or his bush shirt not being tucked in. All that had happened, but he was not unduly bothered. What he wanted to do was to change India's dependence on foreign inventory or foreign arms, which he did initiate. Unfortunately, he remained as a defense minister only for 2.5 years. But I learnt so many intricacies of highest levels of decision making in the government of India from him because of long discussions, long sessions. Sometimes, like I said, he would call up the previous evening and say, tomorrow morning 5:30 or 6, you come. He was not bothered about niceties of breakfast or anything to be offered. He had one cook come, assistant in his house who would cook for him. So one day when he called me early and he said, we'll have breakfast here. I said, okay. So I thought at least some poha or something will be offered. What I was offered was last night's pizza. And so then we went, and I remember General Khandare and us trying to tell him, get a cook from the military at least. But he said, no, I will not take from the MOD, I'll get a private person. One final anecdote I'll say and I'll end, given the context, given the recent controversy. Immediately after his personal staff came from Goa, they were offered CSD canteen cards for inexpensive or cheaper goods from the canteen for the civilians, which they thought that they are authorized. Some of the old timers in MOD offered them that. And they, of course, were so scared of Bhai, as Manohar Parrikar was known. They said, we'll ask Bhai and tell you. So he said, you will not do this. You are not authorized. I am not going to take anything. You are not going to take anything. This is meant for service personnel and the veterans and their families. So don't misuse it. And today we have a controversy, as all of you know. I don't need to mention it. But remember, he was a man of principles. He was a man of great simple habits, humble, and yet very effective when he wanted to be blunt. So I don't know how many of you know what he did in Goa when Narendra Modi was proposed as the prime ministerial candidate. Not really prime ministerial candidate, but chairman of the campaign committee of the BJP in November 2013, when Rajnath Singh was the president of BJP. There was a lot of tussle. They didn't want Modi to become effectively the prime ministerial candidate. And Mr. Advani was resisting it. His two closest followers, Sushma Swaraj and Arun Jaitley, were also resisting it. And there was a lot of to and fro, a lot of jostling, political jostling, all that was happening. So ultimately it fell on Mr. Parrikar to move the resolution in the party in that meeting that they had in Goa, where he was a host. And before moving that resolution, apparently, and he has not told me this, but some of his close associates have told me, and I see no reason why this would not have happened. He apparently went to Mr. Advani and said in Konkani, in Marathi rather, in Hindi, you are like rancid pickle, so please move away. There's a time, shelf life is over, and this is the time for BJP to get a new leader and a new energy, and only then we'll win. And that's how he moved that resolution. So he would be blunt when he wanted to. And of course, we all know how he functioned. All of them will tell you. But these are my memories. In my house, he came number of times unannounced. Would just call up and say, are you there? I'm coming. Tell Mrs. Gokhale to cook some rice and fish. If fish is not available, I'll bring it. But keep 2 bira bottles in the fridge. We'll have that and then go back. That's how my association was with him. I'll always remember him as an elder brother, as somebody who gave me a higher plane in terms of understanding how governance structures work, how executive decisions are taken, and what secrets, how they can be kept. So I'll end there, and we can only pay a tribute by being at least 1/10 of, 1/5 of what he was. That's what I feel every day when I remember him. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
In fact, I remember Nitin sharing not just the fact that Manohar Parrikar ji restructured the procurement, but he restarted the procurement. It had stopped.
Yes.
And I remember your interactions with him. And let me recollect one, because I used to keep hearing it secondhand from Nitin. So apparently Nitin was talking to Manohar Parrikar ji while he was signing off certain files. So Nitin asked him, आपको डर नहीं लगता कि अगला सरकार आएगा तो आपको परेशानी होगी, आप साइन कर रहे हैं? सो अपेरेंटली हिज रिस्पॉन्स, एंड करेक्ट मी इफ आई एम रॉन्ग, नितिन, वाज दैट तब जब सूली में चढ़ना होगा तो चढ़ जाएंगे, अभी ये ज़रूरी है. आई थिंक दोज वेर वेरी वेरी इंस्पायरिंग वर्ड्स. या, एब्सोल्युटली. I'll request Anushka to play a video on Manohar Parrikar ji.
मैं मनोहर परिवार कृष्ण प्रभु पर्रिकर ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूँ कि मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा.
निश्चय, प्रतिभा का संचय, कुछ यूं एक योद्धा का परिचय, संस्कृति की धरोहर, सादगी का सरोवर, अनंत उन्मत गुंज, अपना भाई मनोहर. माकुसाम में जन्मे मनोहर गोपाल कृष्ण प्रभु पर्रिकर बड़े फैसले लेने से ज्यादा उन फैसलों पर निडरता से काम करने के लिए विख्यात थे. इंजीनियरिंग का करियर छोड़कर राजनीति में आने का फैसला हो, या सार्वजनिक जीवन की नई जिम्मेदारियों को निभाने का फैसला, या एक आखिरी फैसला, पर्रिकर जी ने अपने राजनीतिक जीवन की शुरुआत में ही अपनी पत्नी को वचन दिया था कि आने वाले वक्त में वो सार्वजनिक जीवन त्याग देंगे और वापस निजी जीवन की ओर लौटेंगे। लेकिन वचन में तो बस भविष्य की एक कल्पना है और भविष्य में हमारी कल्पना के अलावा भी बहुत कुछ है। साल 2000 में जब उनकी पत्नी का निधन हुआ तो उनको दिया हुआ वचन अपने आप को अकेला पाता इस सार्वजनिक जीवन का हिस्सा बन गया। पर्रिकर जी के सार्वजनिक जीवन से औपचारिकताएं शून्य हो गई। निजी जीवन की जिम्मेदारियां भी अब उसका हिस्सा बन चुकी थी। अपने दोनों बेटों को माता और पिता का प्यार देते वो गोवा के लिए भी एक पिता की छवि बन चुके थे। और ऐसे शुरू हुआ मनोहर भाई का एक नया जीवन, जो फिर सिर्फ प्रभावित हुआ तो अपने प्रदेश और उसके लोगों की जरूरतों से। अक्सर मुलाकातियों से घिरे मनोहर पर्रिकर को शायद ही गोवा की कोई खबर अखबारों से मिलती थी। अपनी योजनाओं को जन जन तक पहुंचाने के लिए भी उन्होंने स्वयं को ही माध्यम चुना। गोवा के राजनीतिक संघर्ष से विकास की स्थिरता का सफर आम लोगों के इस विश्वास से ही संभव हुआ। इन योजनाओं में वैज्ञानिक सोच और सोशल इंजीनियरिंग का एक अनूठा मिश्रण था, जो स्टार्टअप की योजनाओं से युवाओं को आत्मनिर्भर होने को प्रेरित करती है। वहीं नौजवानों पर आश्रित बुजुर्गों को पेंशन देती दूसरी योजना लोगों को स्वतंत्र जीवन जीने का विकल्प देती थी। किसानों को सहारा देने के साथ साथ राष्ट्रीय आय का एक बड़ा हिस्सा शिक्षा पर समर्पित कर पर्रिकर जी शायद सदा ही हर समस्या का स्थायी समाधान खोजते थे। जनता से जुड़े मुद्दों का समाधान करने के लिए उनकी नीति बेहद आसान शब्दों में ये कहती थी कि उनके लिए ये मुद्दे उनकी निजी समस्या जैसे थे। उनकी इस कल्पना से ही उनके विपक्ष भी उनके विपरीत हो गए। उनकी कल्पना और आत्मविश्वास का एक और प्रतीक पश्चिम में स्थित इफ्फी का स्थायी स्थल है। आत्मविश्वास से भरे पर्रिकर जी ने साल 2004 में ये वादा किया था कि वो इफ्फी का इतना शानदार आयोजन करेंगे कि सरकार के लिए पंजीम को स्थायी स्थल न बनाना असंभव हो जाएगा। इफ्फी का गोवा में आना एक आधिकारिक फैसला था। मनोहर पर्रिकर ने उस फैसले को विश्वसनीयता दी। आज इफ्फी की 50वीं सालगिरह पर उनकी प्रतिभा का स्मरण अपनी आत्मविश्वास की शक्ति का एहसास दिलाता है। अपने विनम्र स्वरूप की जीवन समेत सूझे व्यक्तित्व की शख्सियत मनोहर पर्रिकर ने हर आंतरिक युद्ध को समाज और राजनीति के पटल पर लड़ा, पर एक आखिरी आंतरिक युद्ध उन्हें लड़ना था, एक अस्वस्थता का दौर। वो कहा करते थे कि मनुष्य का मस्तिष्क अगर निर्णय कर ले तो वो हर रोग से लड़ सकता है, और उनका युद्ध शायद हम सबके लिए प्रेरणा है। जीत या पराजय के द्वंद्व से दूर निर्णय की तेज रोशनी में जहां हार और जीत सामने हो जाते हैं और रह जाता है बस योद्धा और उसके युद्ध के बीच का रिश्ता। पर्रिकर जी आज हमारे बीच नहीं है, पर उनकी स्मृति मात्र हमारे कई सवालों का जवाब एक साथ दे देती है। बहुत ही सरल साफ शब्दों से सजा एक आशा का संगीत, जो हमें वापस ले जाता है उन्हीं संकल्पों पर, फैसलों पर, उन्हीं हौसलों पर, उसी विनम्रता पर और युद्ध के उस स्वार्थ रहित निर्णय पर। मनोहर पर्रिकर, एक महान योद्धा को विनम्र श्रद्धांजलि।
But there's another thing that came to my mind while this video was playing. This 2009, he had called me over to train the legislature in Goa on e-governance. So I was supposed to be an expert in e-governance, and I still remember walking out of the room, and as a young professional, I was trying to tell him that Goa seems to be dependent on only one industry without me having any knowledge of Goa. So you think Goa is a party place, so it's full of tourism, it's dependent on only tourism. And I still remember 2009 in that little walk, about maybe 2 minutes of walk, where he was walking with him and he was taking me to the room. So I told him, look, if there is a virus attack or something, I had no idea of COVID, but there were other attacks that had happened, these MEMS virus and this and that will have an impact on Goa. And he says, no, here are the other industries, here are the percentages, here are the number of people involved. He had everything on his tips. And I was just amazed, because at the chief ministerial level, having that depth of knowledge while being on the fly and just putting the counter in was absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning mind, in fact, as Nitin had mentioned. In fact, we had got a few books of yours, but unfortunately we left it back in the office. But we're still trying to get it from office, so we might have them and share them. I'll now request Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni to come in and share his views. His talk is on From Siachen to Galwan, Conflicts and Contributions of Shri Manohar Parrikar. We look forward to your views. So I'm not giving any further introduction because everybody knows the Lieutenant General.
Whether they know or don't know, it makes no difference to Air Chief Marshal Chaudhari, Chief of the Air Staff, Mahasahib, Nitin, General Khandare, distinguished guests. I stand before you because I have with me a member of the Shekatkar committee, Mr. Chandrasekhar, seated over here. My first association, of course, with him started off when I was part of the Shekatkar committee. And that's where I realized that while in uniform, obviously you can't get closer to the Raksha Mantri, and it's very difficult. I retired in 2016, and since about 2 years before that, as Chief of Staff, Eastern Command, and then later on at the DG Infantry. And a little before him was Mr. Arun Jaitley, like what Nitin said, as the Raksha Mantri. He happened to be my senior in college. And since he was my senior in college, I was the Chief of Staff, and therefore he was to come to Calcutta as in Eastern Command. I hadn't met him for a very, very long time, of course, because once you're in uniform and he's into politics. And I told then the Chief, General Dalbir, I said, look, I mustn't be there. It doesn't look nice. You're the chief, the army commander's there. Why, you don't need the Chief of Staff. He said, no. You are wanting to wangle away from the reception part. I said, no, okay. I stood there. And sure enough, as soon as Arun Jaitley had to come, he said, "Oi, tu kya kar raha idhar?" So I told him, so, yeah, where you're standing, and then the chief had to tell him he's the Chief of Staff of Eastern Command. "Oi, tu Chief of Staff hai? Bada aadmi ho gaya yaar." And it ended. Later on, the chief took me aside. He said, "You knew him? And you didn't tell me that you knew him?" I said, "I told you I don't want to be there." So I thought if I said something more than that, you might feel uneasy about it. And later when I met Mr. Parrikar as part of the Shekatkar committee, I realized what a man he was. A man, because while before that, when I was the Chief of Staff of 14 Corps, his involvement in Siachen. Because in 2015, Nawaz Sharif in UN gave a 4 points program as to how to disengage, what could be done to ease the relationship between India and Pakistan. And 2 points of the 4 points. One was the demilitarization of Kashmir, and the second was total withdrawal from Siachen. And Mr. Parrikar was asked as to, what do you feel? He said, I don't even bother to reply. What nonsense is he talking? And it was a thing that really hit that what we are talking about later on as total withdrawal from Siachen, demilitarization, something which the Pakis keep talking about and do nothing. But Mr. Parrikar, on his own, when he decided that, remember when we met him there, he said, I know it's very difficult. You all lose about 10 to 14 lives almost every year due to weather. But the best that we can do is to ensure that you get the best of stuff. And he knew what Mr. George Fernandez had done. He was aware of everything. There's nothing that could. And definitely, his coming there, paying homage to the war memorial there, going around, seeing, asking. He was absolutely informal, very, very informal person. He would mix around and things. He got the hang of it. And the thing that he said at that point of time, we've read a lot about it in the press as to how people wanted to de-induct and what then earlier the Prime Minister had wanted it, and if things could work out. It couldn't, because he was very clear. He said, if you lose these heights, it's very difficult to get that back. I've been around and I don't submit to this kind of a talk of de-induction or withdrawal from Siachen. It's not possible. And he was very, very clear about it, that it's just not possible. And subsequently, when he came there, there are certain roads which go from a place called Sasoma, and you go to Sasarla, and then you come down to Chungtash and the areas where a little beyond that, Galwan and all. So he flew over, he saw all of it. And he was so quick to sanction the 39 China strategic roads within no time. And those strategic roads which got sanctioned, we saw the benefit of each of these roads that came up subsequently was when Chinese did what they did in Galwan. If it hadn't been for that, for a long time, a lot of these roads were under this thing. I remember in Tawang also, when I happened to be there, it used to take a long time constructing roads. It wasn't a very easy affair, maybe because of the equipment not being there. Suddenly you find that the BRO's complete allotment had gone up. The road that DBO, Shiok, going right up to the Chushu, and we found that subsequently that Darbuk, about 250 odd kilometers. It used to be so difficult because most of it used to be passing through the riverbed. And Galwan, as it was, if you came down from Galwan, you would hit that particular river Shiok, and the same Shiok river would come down to meeting Nubra and then join and go to Indus. So these kind of riverbeds, understanding of the entire thing, putting in a lot of effort, this thing, when later again as part of the Shekhar committee, the corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board, his insistence that we must do it, his activeness in ensuring that what he used to call the IDDM, the indigenously designed, developed and manufactured. What later on we all call it the Atmanirbhar, self-reliance, and ensuring all of it being done. And we realize now the chief will be talking about later as to what Ukraine, Gaza, and how it helps. His vision at that point of time was that if we have to, sustainability has to be done, we have to manufacture in India. IITian that he was, his understanding, his handwriting, super. And again what Nitin said, that I happened to be at that get-together at his place. I didn't know that the Raksha Mantri was to come. He was going to the airport or something like that. And he just dropped in. And very informal. And that was the first time, probably, I felt he gave an indication that he was to move out as Raksha Mantri and probably going to Goa. And he said it in a little this thing, I'm now going to Goa. So that was the first indication we got that probably he's not be here, as the requirement of his was there. But the corporatization, that helped a great deal. We realize it today. His being an IITian, his understanding and approaching, getting the universities, getting the private players, making the SMEs to move along with him, changing entire thing, the ATAGs and getting the Larsen and Toubro, getting Tata's, DRDO, the complete setup of the DRDO, his insistence that, come on, think, if you do not innovate, you will evaporate. Innovate, come on, move ahead. Very nice. One felt that here's a man who could interact, and because of the committee that we were all part of, every now and then going down to his office, there used to be a small little conference hall where they sit down and you would informally ask how much, what have you been done, and all that. General Shekatkar himself, very close to him, and they knew a lot about it, how to go about his recommendations being accepted. Almost more than 50% recommendations of it been accepted as part of the Shekatkar committee, because getting bang for the buck and ensuring that whatever we were doing our best. And I would put it that whether it was as part of Siachen that we were, and his understanding of it, subsequently, though, of course, he wasn't there in Galwan, by then he had passed away, but his foundation about the strategic roads to come up, the tunneling to be done, equipping the BRO with the latest equipment, ensuring that the things are done, how private industries must go up for development, how exports should grow. And then in one of the talks of informal that we would discuss with him, we were wanting to speak about, what is the comprehensive national power and what it would be involving. And he would say that, look, the military capability is just about 10%. Rest of it is all what the nation can make, whether it was domestic economic capability, whether it was external economic capability, whether it was your scientific technology, DRDO, whether it is your governance, whether it is to do with social development, everything. He said military is just about 10%. Diplomacy, say another about 10%. But the rest of it as a nation, and he knew very well that it is China, which it is. And today, incidentally, of course, it happens to be his birthday also, being the 13th. So that way, and I noticed that if only we had in our lifetime probably got interacted, it's not possible while in uniform at a young age to be meeting anybody. But then lucky that we were sometime in uniform that we saw him, and later on as part of the committee we saw him and how we would interact with him and how the whole thing. He was very keen that the defense forces mustn't stay anywhere near South Block. There was something that he said that too many footprints, too many people in uniform are seen close to the government, they could be moved out. And sure enough, now we have the whole thing coming up opposite the Manekshaw Center, because he said too much of it is. Then even the DSC boys, he would refer to them. He said, no, we don't want any pot-bellied chaps. We must have, chaps looking very young and fresh and things of those kind. So you found that he had a very keen eye on what it should be and how you should go about. And one thing that I always noticed in telling, you don't bother what others are getting. Invariably we would go around, sir, dekho, what others are getting and what is it that we are giving. He said, don't bother about what others are. As long as you get your entitlement and nobody takes away yours, it's more than enough. But I will ensure that you get what it is. So that what Nitin was referring to, the OROP was the very fresh thing, how he went about, and the allotment for the OROP was a very small sum, 500 crores in one budget, I think 1,000 crores in the second budget, but the requirement was over 10,000 to 15,000 crores. But this thing was very good, that he managed to get the OROP, the aspect of the CDS, which was there, moving in his mind, working towards that. So all of it, as a person concerned, and as his vision, as the Raksha Mantri, has noticed that his desire to make India a power to reckon with was something very high in his mind. Maybe because right from childhood he himself used to say, I was an RSS pracharak, and that is how I got into IIT, and I find that we need to be where we are. And a small example that I can say before I close down and hand over to the chief. In 2014, our per capita income used to be about $1,500 US. And today it is about $2,500 US. And with $2,500 US, we are about $3.7 trillion economy. And virtually, if you say PPP, it may go to about $5 or $6 trillion economy. But not by the PPP also. It's about percentage GDP of the world. We are about 4% GDP of the world. The Chinese, he knew exactly what the Chinese at that point of time, in 1993, when they started off, they're about the same, $1,400 US. And in about 2023 today, when you see the Chinese per capita income is about $12,000 US. So that kind of a change that came. For 20 years, we were almost 10 years behind China and going along. If by 1993, what was our per capita income in 2003, there was in 1993. But now, over a period of time, you obviously now notice that China has got $18 trillion. The Americans have about $25 trillion, and we are at about 4. And just about managing about 2,500. But what surprised me was his in-depth telling when this thing. He said, don't worry. And you know something? He said, Korea had only about $500 US. And Korea from $500 US in 1965 touched to about $16,000 US in about 30 years by 1995, working at about 9.2%. And he said, don't worry, we'll also do at about 7.5% पे रहेंगे हम लोग, ज़्यादा दिक्कत होएगा, but we'll also touch. Look at that person and how they very rarely do you find people as politicians who are not into all this kind of a thing, talking this. Then I realized that his qualification, his understanding, his realization, his pushing people, his informality is like what was brought out when they preferred sandals. He said it in the party also, I think. In Marathi he was telling, people kept telling me, you wear a sandal and you come, why don't you wear shoes? Yeah, why are you worried about how I look and what it is? What I do matters. And that is what he did. And definitely we are here gathered today for his memorial lecture. And thank you very much. It couldn't be better than to pay tribute to such a wonderful man who we all are proud of. And today we have IDSA named after him as Manohar Parrikar Defense, this thing. So this is definitely speaking very high about it. And now when you'll hear the Air Chief talk what Ukraine and Gaza and what it was, everybody thought about all wars, where every time we would also talk, short wars, somebody will intervene and the wars will stop. How short wars? You see the Russia, Ukraine is carrying on. You see Gaza is just carrying on. There's no end to the things that are going on. So we have to have what we call punitive deterrence. You've got to have the conventional capabilities, and we also have to ensure that at no point of time that we are caught on the wrong foot. So thank you very much. And once again, Bala said, thanks for giving me an opportunity. Jai, thank you very much. God bless. And
Thank you so much, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, for a very, very insightful talk. As usual, we end up learning a lot from your thoughts. This brings us to the keynote session for today, which is on learnings for Indian military post-Ukraine and Gaza conflicts from the former Chief of Indian Air Force. In fact, I met Air Chief Marshal Chaudhari when we were implementing the Shekathur Committee report for the Air Force. And these are very, very nice interactions. The Air Force had called me to support what they were doing. And I still remember the discussions on whether to cut the nav or cut the edu and so on and so forth. Very interesting conversations. And Air Chief Marshal at that time was looking at the human resource part of the Air Force. And it was very, very insightful interaction that we had. So without much ado, I'll request you to take stage, please.
Check once.
No?
One is done.
I hope the cable is long enough.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think after hearing these great tributes to the wonderful defense minister we had, it reminded me also a small anecdote that I must share. Like Jayajit brought out, I was a part of a committee on implementation of the Shekatkar committee report, and we were reporting to the defense minister on certain aspects. And this was an headquarter ideas committee, and I will not name the persons, but somebody was talking a little, more fictional than facts. So the comment which he made, and it was in Marathi, I was the only Marathi speaking person in that, I cannot say it here, but to translate it, it reminds me of Winston Churchill's famous statement, people who talk by the yards and work by the inches should be kicked by the foot. So this is now the topic for today's discussion. I'm sure this has been now a topic for discussion over many official forums, or many bar rooms and so on. So I will not labor upon the tactical dimensions or the purely, very, very purely military dimensions, though I will have to keep referring to it as I go along the speech. But what I plan to do is to take you through a very broader perspective of what I look at are the strategic lessons of the ongoing conflicts. Just now, General Kulkarni made a remark of this, whether the conflicts will end or not. Ernest Hemingway, famous author, he had taken part as a medical assistant in World War I. And he was taken aback by the conflict was not stopping, it was not ending. And in his first book, he had written this, in Farewell to Arms. He said, perhaps wars weren't won anymore. Maybe they went on forever. I think very, very true statement if you look at the way the world has been in the last 2 decades. Just a few days ago, we came across the Syrian conflict hopefully coming to an end. See where it had started, somewhere in the middle of this line. You see Israel-Hamas keeps playing up, Russia-Ukraine keeps playing up all over. So perhaps the wars will never end. We really don't know what the end state is going to be. So with that in mind, I'll just touch upon what are the strategic thoughts, what is the philosophy, the logic behind how these countries are conducting the conflicts. And in doing so, I will also touch upon how the infusion of technology, weapons has impacted the outcomes or whatever are the ongoing, the status of the ongoing conflicts. So if we are to say that, write out the lessons learned from any conflict, what we must understand is the lessons drawn are different for every country, for every organization. Each one looks at it from a different perspective, from a different prism. So, for example, you look at Desert Storm, Operation Desert Storm, the Gulf War I. It had changed the way wars were fought because the Americans deployed 3,800 kilometers away, strategic airlift, moved a whole lot of forces there, formed coalitions, and then carried out a 37-day relentless attack from the air, followed by a 100-day ground offensive to capture Baghdad. So what did the Americans or the Western world learn from this was that we can deploy at distant places and we can still win conflicts. Okay, so getting over the old this thing of Vietnam and Korea. So this was a new paradigm that we can still win wars away from our shores. But what did the others learn from it? That if the Americans and coalitions are at your doorstep, then you got to do something. So that is how the Russians and the Chinese have now started following the concept of what they call anti-access area denial, A2AD, to keep larger forces as far away from your borders as possible. So same conflict, 2 completely different lessons being learned. The bottom here, what I said, a strong adversary will always look, he will avoid the scenario where he has to prolong the conflict. We'll look for short, swift, decisive outcomes, whereas a weaker opponent will never have a final say. He cannot decide when to end the conflict unless you surrender. And finally, of course, wars will remain a test of logistics, transportation, medical aspects, and the human aspects. This is something that we should never lose sight of. There was one USAF colonel called John Warden. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. In fact, there were two Colonel Johns of the United States Air Force, John Boyd and John Warden. Both of them never rose beyond the rank of a colonel because of their sort of preposterous theories on how to conduct war and how to go about managing the affairs of the Air Force. Now, John Warden had proposed a thing called a 5-ring theory. This was before the Gulf War. He said that any adversary has to be looked at from the point of these 5 rings. You have the outermost is the fielded military, then you have the population, the infrastructure, organic essentials, and in the center of gravity is the leadership. So in the Gulf War, what did they say? Saddam Hussein is center of gravity. In Libya, they said Gaddafi is the center of gravity. You knock out the center of gravity, the war is won. Now to do this, to hit him or hit the center of gravity, you can do what they call onion peeling. You can peel each layer and reach the center, or at that time, being an Air Force officer, and I will emphasize on this, he said, air power can strike all these rings simultaneously. You don't have to go one by one. So this was the John Warden theory. Now I want to look at it from the current perspective. So if those days Saddam Hussein was the center of gravity, physical destruction was the aim. Today what is it? It is to disrupt the communication between the politicians and the military, discredit leadership. We are seeing happening in Ukraine, Russia, even in Israel, the way the ICC has condemned Netanyahu and all that, discredit the leadership. This is the center of gravity. The organic essentials in those days were the electrical grids, fuel storage, etc. Today it is the internet. Supply chain disruption. The infrastructure for us also, like being as an Air Force pilot, for us hitting the infrastructure of the adversary, hitting his roads, railway lines, was considered the most essential part of targeting. We used to identify where is it, if I hit this bridge or this thing, how is it going to get cut off? Not so anymore. Today what we need to do is attack his critical information infrastructure. DDoS attacks, what they call distributed denial of services. Okay. The population meant what it was. Today it is more of attack on financial systems, cripple the economy and so on. And finally, of course, the outer layer, which was the armored columns, the RT guns, the aircraft, the ships. Today, I think more significant is the networks, the softwares, the satellites and so on. Physical destruction of which will achieve the final aims. Okay, so now with this broad perspective of Warden rings and the way the war has been progressing, I shall now touch upon one more aspect, is this what we call the changing character of war. This, everybody knows that the warfare, the character keeps changing with newer technologies, new weapons, new geopolitics and so on. But here, important is only one, which I shall come to. First of all is what we call the compression of relative time. Earlier, something happening in Europe used to affect us maybe after 1 year, 2 years. Crisis in the Middle East have gone on for many years. But today, the Suez Canal being blocked for 1 day will have immediate effect here on our economy, on the Chinese economy, on the entire Southeast Asia. Okay, so this is one. Most important is the information domain is the new center of gravity. I shall just touch upon this in my next slide. Global interconnectivity requires no explanation, and the accelerated pace of change, technology and everything changing so rapidly. Alliances are changing so rapidly. It is very difficult to keep track of who's doing what. In fact, just yesterday somebody sent a WhatsApp meme, shortcut to know what is happening in Syria. So there are a list of, 10 forces here and 10 here, and there are arrows drawn here, there. So it's difficult to know who's with whom today. Like I said, information has become the new center of gravity. Just as an example here, data today is what is the critical raw material. Information is the weapon system. By 2025, by next year, it is predicted that the global data sphere will exceed 175 zettabytes. I had heard of this term for the first time just a few months ago. Okay. And what we call the weaponization of human heuristics, to change your mindset, to think about something different, it requires a lot of pumping of information through whatever means. Social media is one such way to convince people that, okay, he's the bad guy, he's the good guy. This is, for example, I shall touch it upon it, that drones are the weapons of the future, or, this is there. You can start converting the minds. Skeptics will start becoming believers that, yes, this is what it is. Okay, so now coming upon the Russia-Ukraine conflict, like I said, I shall first go over the Russian philosophy of war. Why is it a little different from the rest of the world, and what had changed? After the breakup of the Soviet Union in the 90s, there were a lot of turmoil going around all around Russian state, the erstwhile CIS states, whether it was Moldova, Tajikistan, the Caucasus, Chechen, all these places, there were little turmoils going on. And the best way to counter all of them, the Russians felt at that time, was to carry out swift, short attacks with, specialized forces, small teams, and so on. And that success made them believe more and more that this is the way forward. And no point in having such a large conscript army. We should just form smaller teams, good weapons, and so on. So there were two schools of thought. One was to control the Russian borders, the porous borders. The second, of course, the military felt that the NATO is not going to diminish. It is going to remain the biggest threat, and they are going to spread as far as the Baltics, and even at that time it was predicted that they will surround Russia. So necessity to have a large military. So there were two completely different schools of thought. So one was to develop small high readiness units, and the other was have larger armed forces to counter the NATO threat. Now, under these circumstances, somewhere they followed a midway path. They did not pursue one philosophy to its end. So basically, in the early days of the Syrian campaign, in 2011 or so, they found that these small units, high readiness units, precision strikes could achieve the aim. So that convinced them even more that this is the way forward. So the whole thought process began in that. There was one chief of general staff by the name General Valery Gerasimov. Now he became a very influential man in Russia, started espousing on what the future of the character of warfare is going to be, how the Russian military should be, and so on. And the way he used to keep talking and convincing people about two things. One is that they don't have to prepare for a kinetic war every time. He says even non-kinetic means can achieve the aims. Second, if it is kinetic, it has to be precision, long range. So you don't want to have, one-on-one contact with the troops. So the best is try all covert means, try everything, information warfare, whatever you can, non-kinetic. That may still win the war. Topple governments. This is what was, what he learned from what they call the color revolutions, if you recollect, in the 90s and see. So many color revolutions, toppling of governments were taking place without shots being fired. It was basically an information warfare campaign, non-kinetic. So Gerasimov believed that you do non-kinetic, or if you want to do kinetic, do long-range precision strike. This is the only way to, win any war in future. So he started this concept of short, swift, surprise wars. Greater emphasis, like I said, on non-kinetic. And this was a term, some of you, I don't know if you've heard this, it's a purely Russian word. It is called Gibridnya Vojna. It is hybrid warfare. Now, hybrid warfare, we are all familiar with these terms that are being thrown about these days. The Westerners call it the fourth generation warfare, information warfare, or new age warfare, whatever, hybrid warfare. This is something like that, but yet something different. Because the emphasis on various elements are different from the Western world. I'll just show you here in one slide. It's a busy slide, don't go by the entire thing there. Basically, the graph shows that as the conflict keeps going up, what is constant, if I use this, my arrow here, what is constant is conduct of information warfare remains throughout. The military action is only a small part. So this was the Gerasimov theory. that we shall use, the whole of nation will be used to carry out non-military means first. That is subversion, information warfare, bring down the morale of the enemy and so on. Okay, and then take on military measures just for a little while. So what they sought is short military action. This is what gave rise to this, what they call special military operations. It started on 22nd February. Special military operation. That short, swift, quickly go. Meanwhile, keep subverting them. And here we have to fall back in history. Back in the 1920s, Stalin had decided, when the Russians, erstwhile states were joining together to form the USSR, he had said that we should populate each of these states with Russians, Russian nationals. Okay. Probably anticipating that 100 years later, if some breakup happens, he said, we will still have Russian nationalists there. He said, you can defeat a country, but you can't defeat culture. Culture will remain for thousands of years. Okay. So this Gerasimov doctrine has now looked into how do we carry out subversive actions to change the culture. Okay. So here the first thing that you realize, for us in the armed forces or the military, if you ask me, going by the warden ring, what should I hit first? I will hit the enemy's communication center. Correct? I will knock out his mobile towers. I will break the link between the commanders and the field people. But what happened in Russia in the Ukraine conflict from February 22 onwards till today, the networks are still functional. They purposely did not hit the networks. Wherever they were hit, the Starlink took over and made connectivity possible. It is very important for them, part of this doctrine, to keep the communications going so that you can feed information. You can challenge, you can, subvert, you can, the enemy by giving him wrong information all the time. So many instances are there, have been brought to record where the Russians have transmitted over whatever means to say that, you're going to be hit tonight. Let's say an ammunition dump or something. You're going to be hit tonight. If you want to save yourself, please go home. And people have left those, their posts and gone. So these were the subversive activities. Information warfare, like I said, has continued throughout. So, in short, again, the Russian operations, it was based on the Gerasimov's philosophy of the new warfighting concepts. Initial strikes, like I said, were more kinetic. There was a stiff resistance from Ukraine. We are all aware of this. The Ukrainians exploited all the weapons given to them by the NATO countries, and these new weapons gave them an opportunity to create gaps in the Russian progress. A quick look at what was happening there. On 24th February, this was the situation. Crimea and part of Donbass were already under Russian control. Initially, they carried out counter-air operations against depth airfields also. Actually their strikes were focused around Hostomel, which is close to Kyiv. The idea was to capture Kyiv, okay, and make the Ukrainian government capitulate at the earliest. Okay, so their lines of thrust were also from the Belarusian side and from this side towards Kyiv. But shortly they gave up these two sides. And they continued only along the Donetsk, the Donbass and the Kharkiv area. The long-range cruise missiles were also used to attack Homostel, Kyiv area. Now, here is Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese scholar, had said one thing. The worst strategy is to attack a fortified city. Okay. So history has shown throughout, whether it was Troy or whether it was any other battle in the world, you attack a fortified city and you will face a lot of losses. Now Kyiv, it is not actually classically fortified, but it was a city, it is a capital. They will do anything to defend it. Okay, so probably they realized that it's a wrong strategy right in the beginning to attack the capital city. So that could be one reason why the thrust was withdrawn. I shall not go over the tactics and the battle space. Like I said, I will now just quickly summarize some of the lessons that I see emerging from here. First of all, proactive deployment or strategic deterrence. How effective it is for us to see. I shall touch upon it when I come on the Israel-Hamas lessons also. The word deterrence and how effective it can be. What kind of deterrence we really need is something that we have to see. The blurred aim, like I said, whether to capture Kyiv or give up. So all my seniors here, veterans will agree that we learned principles of war, that famous acronym called case of CSM. The first was aim, selection and maintenance of aim. Okay. So once you've selected your aim, then you have to follow it to the end. You cannot keep wavering and change your aim and, strategy continuously. Information warfare, war of narratives did not work out the way they wanted it. Miscalculation of duration of war, like I said, the Gerasimov doctrine said it will be a short and swift special military operations. The nationalist fervor of Ukraine was not anticipated. They didn't expect civilians, complete, college students all coming together, the IT professionals, the nerds, setting up, standby networks and so on at such rapid pace. This was not expected. The military might was restricted. They did not put the full military might, once again, falling back to the Gerasimov doctrine, that we don't have to apply the full power. Short, swift, along with information warfare will win the war. Sorry. The operational, of course, air superiority, this, actually I could have spoken for an hour on why they failed to achieve air superiority and why it is, the battle is carrying on. But point is that coordination of firepower, what we see was lacking, target engagement, selection of targets were incorrect, sometimes probably poor leadership has affected that. Ineffective in handling urban warfare. This again, when we look at the Israel-Hamas, we'll come to this. None of us, I will use this thing for all of us, the veterans, really have the wherewithal, the weapons and the training to operate in an urban environment. Okay, we can undertake courses in, urban warfare, we can do all that, but finally when it comes to a situation like this, whether it is attacking Kyiv or Kharkiv or the Gaza Strip, it's a completely different ballgame. All that we learned in any war game or any theory is thrown out of the window. The tactical issues, I will not go into this in detail. Logistics, very important. Lack of logistics coordination from the mainland. Again, failure of the doctrine. The doctrine said short and swift. Just cater for 2 days of ration, pani and ammunition and the war will be over. No backups planned at that time. Supply chain was vulnerable to the drone attacks. The Russians could not interdict the Ukrainian logistic supply chain, which was coming in from the west, from Poland side. And a lot of logistics establishments and fuel and ammunition dumps were targeted by the Ukrainians. And the Russians could not meet the high logistics demand of the mechanized forces on the ground. Now, technology, I shall touch upon this a little more towards the end as a summarize. But what is there is important to understand is the rapidity which the Ukrainians have adapted to the NATO weapons. To integrate a Western weapon on an originally Russian aircraft, for example, is not an easy task. But they have done it and they have utilized those weapons to their full potential, which is quite a commendable job. The HR, civilians used as a human shield. More than that is the use of civilian entities. The Ukrainians had formed a group called the Aerorozovidka, a team of volunteers, all IT professional. Supposedly the oldest one is about 30 years old in that. They are the ones who designed a software called Delta. Delta identifies what are the targets, what is the target to weapon matching, what kind of weapon should you hit it with, and so on. And that has really caused substantial damage to the initial attack coming in towards Kyiv. It was one of the longest armored columns seen since World War II, 40 kilometers long, going towards Kyiv, but it was halted in a track by Aerorozovidka's young boys who, equipped only with motorcycles and quad bikes, going through the forests across Kyiv, carrying out electronic warfare, jamming, drone attacks, and so on. So this is a new concept, a new aspect which has come to light, is using non-military personnel to actually prosecute the war. Drones, people keep saying Russia, Ukraine, and Armenia, Azerbaijan are examples how drones are going to change the character of warfare. Unfortunately, I'm not in full agreement. Yes, they have made some effects on the way the operations are being conducted, but the point is that it is not a war-winning strategy, that I will procure drones and next war I will win. It is not going to be a war-winning strategy. Unless you have an requisite control of the air superiority, you cannot use them the way you want to use them. The attrition rates are going to be very high. Over 10,000 drones have been shot down in that region in the last 3 years, 1,000 days. Okay, the cost of, initially we heard so much about the Turkish Bayraktars being used and so, but they've all got shot up in a contested airspace. And finally, the effects that they could produce are not commensurate with the money that was spent on them. Technology, of course, will be the ultimate game changer. What they realized, like I mentioned about this small group of people carrying out drone strikes on selected targets or using AI-based tools to identify the targets. This is something that has actually revolutionized the character of war. Conventional forces, slowly they realize, are becoming obsolete in certain areas. New pressure points are being applied on the war-fighting forces. The technology is evolving at a rapid pace, it goes without saying. The famous Moore's law of the 70s, that the number of transistors on a chip will keep doubling every year. Okay, so now they actually are now 1 billion times more powerful than what they were 30 years ago. And it's really the ubiquity of these technologies is astonishing. The DJ-90 drone, for example, costs $1,200. You can buy it on Amazon today. It comes from China. And it is being used by all the nations. It provides the new technology giving a high degree of autonomy. Basically, in countries like Ukraine, where they are actually running short of manpower, even small injuries can take somebody out of the battlefield. So even if he's out for a week or 10 days in a hospital and recouping, the strengths along the borders have thinned out completely. Here is where they are now looking for autonomous systems, which can help them, cater for the loss of manpower there. Most of these technologies are off the shelf, easy to use, easy to adapt. A lot of them require no training. Okay, so overheads are minimal. Ultimate aim is that to be able to capitalize on what technology has to offer, the civilian technology, to be able to put to good use in the military. The last point from here is on the targeting. Selection of right targets. This has to be the fundamental principle. What has gone wrong from both sides, the way I look at it, is a lot of times selecting incorrect targets. Like I mentioned, the Ukrainians adapted to Western weapons very fast. They got the British Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles, which they put on the MiG-29s. We were quite astounded the way they put them on the MiG-29 because we operate the same aircraft, we have the similar weapons. Very long-range cruise missiles. But finally, where they failed was target selection. If they had targeted, they had looked for about 10 major ammunition dumps. They targeted 3 of them, left 7 of them. What did it do? It cut out the supply to one small part of the Russian armed forces. So if they had targeted 7 instead of 3, probably it would have had a better effect. The ATACMs which they are getting from the Americans, once again, diffused targeting philosophy. Somebody says, let's hit this, somebody says, let's hit that. Now the West is not going to keep giving them these weapons. They are very expensive. So a big failure from both sides was that the targets actually which will yield leverage are the economic or the industrial targets. A fine example of this, if you go back, read history, in World War II, some of the most daring raids by the Royal Air Force, by the Allied forces, were attacking the ball bearing factories in Germany, in Dresden area. Why ball bearing? Because they realize you keep hitting anything, it is not making any effect. You hit the ball bearing factory, their tanks will come to a stop, their aircraft will come to a stop. So they selected the right target at that time. Okay, so this is something which we don't see happening in the ongoing conflicts here. So finally, like I said, non-adherence to principles of war can be costly. it is going to be very difficult to forecast the duration of a war. And we've heard this term Atmanirbharta, self-sufficiency, more than enough times. It goes without saying that we cannot fight a war with somebody else's weapons. Okay. I think I've summarized most of this. I shall not go on here. The second last point here is an important thing for the senior officers in the military, to command competence in adapting to technology. A lot of people of, I can say, my peer group have always been skeptical of technology. They're always worried, how do I use it? I am a little lost. I cannot do more than, probably go to an ATM or do a digital transfer. But there is so much more to exploit. And unless the senior command, the officers in command are aware of technology, we will never be able to use it to its fullest. Because you will not listen to a young boy or girl, a young officer who says, sir, this can do wonders. Because you don't know what this capability is actually. So the most important lesson I say is for the command competence in adapting to technology. Okay, now moving on to this side of the world. Once again, I will start with the philosophy. Israel's primary philosophy of keeping its country safe was deterrence. That we will build up our arsenal to such a level, we will continue showing our prowess to a level where we will deter everybody. So they have continued building up their strength. Focus has been on long-range weapons, precision strike again, on their air power, on their armor. Okay. Defensive measures were the Iron Dome, the protective measures against all kind of attacks from the air. But their deterrence was against nations, to deter Syria, Lebanon, Iran from attacking. Not against, you cannot use the same tools to deter a small force, or I would say a small force in a sense, a hidden force like the Hamas or the Hezbollah. It requires a different level of deterrence or a different kind of deterrence. Okay, so the important lesson here is not to mix up that, okay, if I have, let's say, huge arsenal of high caliber weapons, my enemy is going to be deterred. It may not happen. Okay. So their philosophy was based on three tiers. First was denial. Firstly, they relied on their intelligence to say that, nothing can happen. If you hit the Hamas leadership and infrastructure, they will come to a stop quickly. Okay, the second was the belief in the transitive property of denial. That means if I hit Hamas here, the Hezbollah will get scared there. Or if I hit the Houthis in Yemen, the Hamas will get scared here. So this was a firm belief that I do one, the other chap will not do anything to us. And of course the assumption that terrorist activities are enmeshed with the political entities. So huge mistake, we all read it, that you cannot mistake Hamas for Palestine or vice versa. They are completely different organizations. So this attack on the 7th of October broke the Israeli myth, their philosophy. They then started going on to what they call the offensive defense, is simultaneous attack at different depths using all the means that they had. Once again, focus there, I'll come to this at the end of my thing. Focus was what they were prepared for. They were prepared for an armored invasion. They were prepared for large force attack. So their retaliation was also sort of catering to that. They had never catered for warfare from the tunnels or from gliders. Okay. And so this is what I said. Fortified irregulars were not catered for, absolutely. So their philosophy right now is what they call to turn on the light. It is search for them. In very colloquial terms, take a torch to start looking where those guys are hiding. Okay. And now put out the fire, then hit them. And reduce the time between the sensor and the shooter. Minimize that. So that is the philosophy on which they are working. Probably a bit too late. Here once again the limitations. Precision firepower in dense urban terrain will have limitations. You can have the best of the weapons, but all these weapons have been designed for military targets out in the field. A weapon, a 1,000 kilogram missile, with a warhead of say 500 kgs is meant to destroy an ammunition dump or something else. If I hit one building, the collateral damage is going to be phenomenal. It is not meant for that kind of target. Missile defense, of course, has the potential. We should not lose sight of the fact that the Iron Dome proved very effective. And of course, the importance of active protection systems. A lot of their air defense, armor and all that is without an active protection because they believe that they can, ram through. And now they're facing the losses because of not catering for protecting these elements. There's no room for laxity. Appreciating the enemy's stance is what is important. Technology. Once again here, for us in the Air Force, we create we make what is called target folders. So we identify each target and based on all the intelligence inputs, then you decide what is the best weapon for that, how many weapons are required, and so on. So it's a manual task which takes sometime days maybe to decide exactly what is the direction of attack, what is the weight of attack, and so on. Now the Israelis were also doing it. Till again a group of youngsters came out with this software called Gospel only last year. So from 100 targets a month, creating 100 targets, they are doing 50 targets an hour. The software is able to generate. That's the rate at which now they can prepare themselves against targets. Unfortunately, these targets no more are relevant because the Hamases, they are all hiding in tunnels and elsewhere. But how one a small piece of technology can really alter the way things will move forward. The conflict termination criteria, like I said, if you are the stronger adversary, you can decide when to terminate the conflict. But if you are the weaker one, you will never have a say. So it's always the question as to what is the criteria where you will come to an end of this conflict. Overconfidence. 1 week before 7th of October, Jake Sullivan had made this. He said that Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in the last 2 decades. This was exactly 1 week before the attack. Asymmetric threats, hybrid warfare are here to stay. Expensive air defense systems, we require cheaper alternatives for this. Air defense against the entire spectrum. Here is what we see, ballistic missiles from Iran to smaller rockets coming in from Gaza Strip. Okay, you cannot have the defense for everything. Every country can't afford it. Israel being a small country can do it. But what is our level of preparedness for this kind of attacks is something that we have to plan for. Trigger events must be prepared for and rehearsed. Punitive capability should be visible and advertised. This is what is actual deterrence. That mere saying that I have got this weapon or this weapon, not enough. You have to actually advertise it. And air power, with its responsiveness, lethality, has actually proven to be a good option. Having the correct equipment for urban warfare, though it may not be really applicable, but you never know with the with the demography that we have here, where you may need to have conduct operations in an urban environment. Lastly is the one term which I call the strategic depth, the necessity to have all these points. Geographic depth, yes, we are fortunate we have the geographic depth to be able to move our forces back and forth. Technology and cyber depth is something that we have to look at. Do we have the resilient structures? Do we have, if we are hit somewhere, cyber attack, how quickly can we bounce back? How quickly can our technological prowess help us to counter the attacks, the cyber attacks from the enemy and so on? Alliances and forward bases, necessity to be able to move your forces back and forth to keep the enemy guessing from where you are. Air and space superiority, again, goes without saying. Logistics, networks, asymmetric, catering for asymmetric warfare. And finally, most important is resilience and public morale. How confident is the nation that we can, together as a nation, we can pull together and fight off any adversary is one of the most important takeaway from any of these conflicts. So I would like to end by this. I just got this from somewhere. It says, because militaries are always dreaming about the war they want, they can be blind to the war that they are faced with. Nations have lost wars because fighting a war they wanted was more important than winning the war that was going on. Okay, so I think this is one of the most important takeaways for me. So thank you for your patience and
Last questions.
oh please, yes.
I'm tempted, sorry. First question I have is, why did it take 7 hours for a force like IDF to respond when the terrorist attack was happening? That's one. The second question is that tunnel warfare has been around since the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and so on. Haven't militaries learned from those experiences?
Yes, 7 hours actually, if you look at for the Israeli environment and the distances and this thing, it may be a bit too much. But remember once again the sanctity of 7th of October, the Yom Kippur day, everybody is praying, the festivities are on, probably took a little longer. The second is to now decipher once again what to attack. Like I said, their philosophy was large-scale attack. Okay, so they were always prepared for a very large-scale attack. And they expected large-scale attack to, from Syria, Lebanon, or any other Arab forces. But this was something that took them completely by surprise. And moving on to tunnel warfare, yes, it can happen anywhere. I mean, we have two stalwarts from the infantry, so they can tell you how feasible it is today in our environment also. But once again, I don't know if we are so geared up to be able to take on the entire spectrum from guerrilla warfare, tunnel warfare, going on to countering hypersonics and this thing. It's a big call for the nation. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Air Chief Marshal. That was absolutely brilliant. So much that we all learned collectively. Thank you again. I would like to present a little memento for you, sir. One more thing is the book. That's been also I would also request Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni to please come and be felicitated.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. I need to wait for him, please. Thank you. Oh, and
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
Nitin, I will not give you your book.
Although I can do with one because I'm running out of copies.
That will say.
No, that's okay. I've told Paul from where you got this. Right? He wants us to do this. Thank you very much. In fact, I reread the book today and thinking, did I write this?
I'll give you this to write the book. Next
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.
We've got one more book. I'll just. General Kundari, thank you so much for coming down.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you being here. Thank you. You want to say something? Yeah, if you could just, I'm sure you know.
Firstly, a very big thanks to Finns for holding this event here. We've all seen it happening in down south below Vindhyas. So I think this is a very welcome move, and most importantly, the way late Manohar Parrikar was encouraging Finns. I thought I must mention this here. I felt that before we close today and before Bala Sahib comes here, firstly to thank Chief Marshal Chaudhari, the way brilliant analysis in this short time where this war has been going on for 3 years now. February it will be 3 years, and he had to complete it within minutes. So it's brilliant, I must say, and I really admire. And the second one, 2 years plus. But again, the purpose for which we are here, to remember Manohar Parrikar ji, and like Nitin very correctly brought out, we all got associated to him, never knowing him, and he selected his team. And you know, the best compliment comes when the person has left the chair and somebody decides to talk about him. So I will recount a couple of things. After he had left, and one day as a DGDIA, I was called by the Defense Secretary Sanjay Mitra, another very professional man. And he wanted to ask me something, so I told him. And then he just looked up and he said, "Now I know why Manohar Parrikar was so successful, he had selected such a team." So that is the compliment that he left for Manohar Parrikar. I was still not DGDI when first time I met, and I think Nitin was instrumental in getting me there because there was an ongoing case in Supreme Court. And Nitin told him that General Khandare is the person handling it in MS branch, and practically every week he is in Supreme Court. So he said, okay, call him, Kota House again, boys hostel. And I think it was night, about 12 o'clock or so, he heard, understood everything. He said, tell me, what will it take to stop this case tomorrow? See, look at his mind. He is not looking at prolonged litigation. So I told him two things. The first one is, there's a person from your party pleading for the other side. So you have to send a message. Second, release vacancies. So he said, how many? So I said, we've done a back of the envelope calculation. I can get back tomorrow. It's going to be in 3 figures. He said, okay, come back tomorrow. So next morning I went and I told him 141 vacancies of colonel doesn't happen. It's just not possible. Within 24 hours, he said, you're going to court tomorrow? I said, yes, sir. Okay, meet the Chief Justice, Justice Thakur, and tell him the government is willing to release 141 vacancies, the case must stop. And that's what he did. So, one more thing, how, when we talk of conflict termination, this is one conflict inside.
Very important.
Firstly, during the surgical strikes, we were all busy trying to sort it out. There was a core group, things were happening. And the night it was to happen, he rang me up again, unknown number, and he said, come. That's all, come. He said, what is it planned? I said, sir, this is what is planned. Okay, we stay here till next morning. And when everything had happened, I came home. My wife also till date doesn't know what was happening that night. So that is how confidentiality has to be kept. And after that, promptly he said, let's go to Uri. So he said, yes, sir. So I said, but chief will accompany you. He said, no. I want you to come because they won't understand my Hindi. You understand my Marathi. So you tell them what it is. I said, okay. So I went with him, and then in the video there was one picture where I'm standing there. So while we were in that helicopter, Mi-17, he asked me, now that this is over, Pakistan is sorted out, can I ask the people about Europe there? I said, sir, Uri mein nobody has time for Europe. Nobody is going to give any answer, but you can ask. It's up to you. So he said, okay. So he asked, and everyone looked at him. They didn't know what he was talking because they're all busy fighting. So there is always a difference on the other side of Banihal. So he understood that. Then he said, okay, can I try in Bibi Cant, Srinagar? You can try, sir. So he asked somebody, and that person told him everything about Arup, which even I did not know. So he looked at me puzzled. So I said, Saab, Subdar Saab, I said, Saab, आप श्रीनगर में कब से हैं? बोला सर 7 दिन पहले दिल्ली से आया. So this is how the difference. And finally after he had left, so one day he rang me up again. He said, come to Goa. I said, okay. And he said, okay, come. So I went to his office. He was busy sorting out people and whatever had been undone. So he was trying to sort it out. Then he said, what we say in Marathi, satkar. He was unka satkar hona tha. So we went to a place which is a garden, and my God, there were thousands of families. I'm not saying people, thousands of families, and bhai, it was like that. And what moved me the most was a small kid, must be about 8 years, 9 years. He tugged at his shirt and he said, bhai, today is my birthday. And I have brought this cake and we both will cut it. You see, this is what he was. So we know what he was as an RM, but what was he as a public figure? Then Utpal, Manohar Parrikar and I, we had dinner, and now he had to drop me to the hotel. Which minister ever or which chief minister comes to drop somebody to the hotel? So Utpal was driving the red car, he was sitting there, I was sitting there, and promptly as we entered the hotel, the security guard stopped us. Imagine he is asking the chief minister, kisko milna hai? So he turned around, he said, he looks to be from Bihar, you tell him. So I asked him in Marathi, should I tell him who you are? He said, no, you tell him who you are. And that's how he dropped and went. So, like what all of us feel, we miss him a lot. And had he been here, we would have done wonders. And what was given out, Shekatkar committee, Jan Shekatkar was very, very close to him. And we are still following what he left for us. Corporatization we did. Atmanirbharta we are following. The point which the Air Chief brought out, the confusion between short wars, long wars, it was there during his time also. Acquisitions, why does it take so long? So all that was there. And one last point, when he had to get something signed by everyone, he used to call us in that hall and say, Isko
so much, General Khandare. It's always a pleasure listening to you. I'd request now the Secretary General of Finns to come and give the vote of thanks. Bala Sahib ji.
Air Marshal Chaudhari ji, General Kulkarni, जनरल खंडारे, नितिन गोखले और इस सभागृह में उपस्थित वेटरन्स एंड डिग्निटरीज, मनोहर पर्रिकर was a versatile personality. बहुत कुछ कहा गया है, मैं भी बहुत कुछ ऐड कर सकता हूँ. इसका कारण ये है कि उनकी फैमिली और हमारी फैमिली बहुत क्लोज थी, बहुत क्लोज. यानी ये मैं बता सकता हूँ कि उनका हमारे घर में आना जाना ये काफ़ी रेगुलर था. इवन आफ्टर हिज बिकमिंग द डिफेंस मिनिस्टर, आके वो मेरे माँ के साथ बैठता था. इतना क्लोज हमारा रिलेशन उनके साथ था. ऐसा है कि बहुत कुछ बातें वो बताते भी थे. एक बार उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा कहीं सत्कार होने वाला था, तो नाम ढूंढने लगे. ये IITian है, IITian है, किसी संस्था की IITian है. मुंबई के आईआईटी के लिस्ट में इनका नाम ही नहीं मिल रहा था। उसका कारण ये था कि उन्होंने कंक्लूजन नहीं, अरे ये आईआईटी नहीं होगा, ये आईटीआई वाला होगा। तो उसका कारण ये था कि इनका जो नाम था वो शेणवी पर्रिकर मनोहर, नहीं सरनेम उनका शेणवी ये था, तो एस से तो इनका नाम ही नहीं मिल रहा था। तो इसलिए वो क्या ना, ये आईआईटीएन नहीं है, ये आईटीआई वाला होगा। ये उन्होंने एक जगह पर हमें बताया था, आपको नितिन को मालूम होगा कि हमारे बहुत ट्रांसपेरेंट थे बताने में, अपनी गलतियां भी बताते थे, खुला बताते थे, लोगों को बताते थे। एक बार उनकी पब्लिक इंटरव्यू नितिन जी ने और मैंने ऐसे हमने ली थी मुंबई में, बहुत अच्छी थी। मतलब लोग तो बहुत कहते हैं, लेकिन मेरे बारे में लोगों के मन में और भी कुछ गलत बातें हैं, गलत यानी कुछ लोगों का कहना है। तो मैं कि मेरे पास एक मामलेदार वीडियो आया, वीडियो नहीं, एक व्यक्ति आई, तो उसका काम नहीं हो रहा था। तो उन्होंने बोला कि फलाना फलाना मामलेदार है ना, वो मेरा काम नहीं करता है। तो मैं वो बताते बताते उन्होंने फ़ोन से फ़ोन किया, बता दिया, काम हो गया। लेकिन वो जो व्यक्ति थी वो इनके बारे में बैड माउथिंग करती थी। तो एक बार उन्होंने उनको बुलाया और पूछा, भाई क्यों, भाई क्या बात है, तुम्हारा काम तो हो गया, फिर भी तुम मेरे बारे में इतना गलत क्यों बोलते हो? नहीं वो तो सब ठीक है, लेकिन आपने मुझे सुना नहीं। उनकी आदत ये थी कि आप बोलते रहो। वो लिखते भी थे, काम भी करते थे और वो सुनते भी थे। ये उनका एक बहुत अच्छा स्वभाव था। लेकिन उसको लगता था कि मेरा सुना नहीं है, इसलिए बोले आपने मेरा सुना नहीं, सो ही वॉज नॉट सेटिस्फाइड। तो ऐसी कुछ बातें हैं। हमने एक प्रोग्राम किया था SRDM हैदराबाद में, सेल्फ रिलायंस इन डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, ऐसा एक सेमिनार हमने ऑर्गेनाइज किया था। उसके कुछ दिन पहले या 6 महीना पहले ये डिफेंस मिनिस्टर बने थे। तो मैंने कहा कि मेरा पर्सनल जो पहचान थी उसका यूज़ करके मैंने कहा कि आप इसमें आइए और इनागोरेट कीजिए। तो बोला मैं नहीं आऊँगा। तो मैंने बोला नहीं, आना चाहिए। क्यों आना चाहिए? नहीं, मैंने कहा कि अच्छा प्रोग्राम, पहली बार हम इस विषय के ऊपर कुछ डिबेटिंग कर रहे हैं, कुछ लोगों को बुला रहे हैं, इसलिए आपने आना अच्छा रहेगा। एक कंडीशन, बोला मैं आऊँगा, मुझे 48 आवर्स में आपने इसके प्रोसीडिंग जो है, कंक्लूजन जो मुझे देना चाहिए। हमने बोला ठीक है, मान लिया, और हमने दे भी दिया। वो लगभग हाफ डे हमारे साथ उस समय थे। तो एक कुछ प्रेजेंटेशन चल रहा था, मतलब उनका माइंड कैसा था ये बताने के लिए मैं बता रहा हूँ। माइंड कैसा था उनका, सोचने का तरीका क्या था। तो प्रेजेंटेशन देते देते उन्होंने हमका इनागोरल सेशन हो गया, बाद में प्रेजेंटेशन था। तो हमने उनको बोला कि आप डायस पर ही बैठो। नहीं, मैं डायस पर नहीं बैठूंगा, मैं नीचे बैठूंगा। तो ऑडियंस में आके बैठे, क्योंकि ऑडियंस में बैठने से मैं समझ पाऊंगा क्या बात है। डायस पर नहीं बैठूंगा, वो बैठे नहीं डायस पर, नीचे आके बैठे। कुछ प्रेजेंटेशन चल रहा था, उन्होंने उनको बोला अरे हाँ ठीक है, आपके लास्ट स्लाइड पहले दिखाओ। और उन्होंने उसको बाकी सब स्टॉप किया, लास्ट स्लाइड पहले दिखाओ। तो ये जो एक सेटअप इंटेलिजेंस ये जो था, ये इस प्रकार का था। और मैं ये बता रहा हूँ कि जो कंक्लूजन्स हमने SRDM के दिया था, उसमें कुछ बातें उन्होंने तुरंत इम्प्लीमेंट भी कर दिया उनके होते हुए। हमने कई बातें और भी सुनी, और एयर मार्शल जी ने जो एनालिसिस किया, मुझे लगता है कि सबके लिए ये बहुत ही, मैं उससे भी मैं तो ये कहूँगा कि फिन्स के लिए एक बहुत अच्छा गाइडलाइन एयर मार्शल जी ने दिया है कि किस प्रकार से एक थिंक टैंक की सोच होनी चाहिए। मुझे लगता है कि ये एक गाइडलाइन हमें आज यहाँ मिल गई कि किस प्रकार से एनालिसिस होने चाहिए, कैसे होने चाहिए, वगैरह वगैरह जो बातें हैं वो सभी आज यहाँ मुझे भी सीखने को मिले। शायद मैं कुछ टर्मिनोलॉजी नहीं समझ पाया हूँगा, लेकिन फिर भी ध्यान में तो ये आ गया कि कुछ बातें इस प्रकार से करनी चाहिए, इतने डेप्थ एनालिसिस होनी चाहिए, और ये थिंक टैंक का काम है। एक दृष्टि से हमें एयर मार्शल जी ने आज मार्गदर्शन किया है फिन्स को। बहुत अच्छा आज का ये जो समय था वो इस दृष्टि से फ्रूटफुल रहा, ऐसा मैं कहूँगा। ये प्रोग्राम हम हमेशा मुंबई गोवा 3 हुए, तो 2 मुंबई में किए, 1 गोवा में किया, 1 ऑनलाइन किया था हमने उसमें से। तो जब जयजीत कहने लगे कि इस समय हम दिल्ली में करेंगे, मैंने बोला यार हमारी तो आदत वहाँ की है, नहीं दिल्ली में करेंगे। मैंने बोला ठीक है दिल्ली में करेंगे। लेकिन आज जब मैं यहाँ बैठा तो मुझे लगा कि मैं महाराष्ट्रियन हूँ, महाराष्ट्रियन में प्रोग्राम चल रहा है, क्योंकि ये महाराष्ट्र सभी महाराष्ट्रियन, आज जिन्होंने भी बोला वो सब महाराष्ट्रियन और मराठी है, इसलिए मुझे ठीक है। लेकिन मैं आज यहाँ खड़ा हूँ केवल एक्सप्रेस करने, ग्रेटिट्यूड एक्सप्रेस करने के लिए। और मुझे लगता है कि जिस प्रकार का प्रोग्राम किसी थिंक टैंक ने करना चाहिए, थिंक टैंक के प्लेटफॉर्म पर होना चाहिए, उस प्रकार का प्रोग्राम आज यहाँ हमने अनुभव किया, बहुत अच्छा अनुभव किया। आई एक्सप्रेस माई ग्रेटिट्यूड टू ऑल द स्पीकर्स, स्पेशली एयर मार्शल चौधरी जी। मैं थैंक्स कहता हूँ कि पूरी टीम C-DEP की, क्योंकि C-DEP और फिन्स ने मिलकर किया था। यहाँ की पूरी व्यवस्था जो है आज की, ये C-DEP के कार्यकर्ता कहें, वर्कर्स कहें, एम्प्लॉयज़ कहें, कलीग्स कहें, उन्होंने ये सब व्यवस्था की है, और इसी की वजह से ये इतना अच्छा और फ्रूटफुल इस प्रकार का कार्यक्रम है, पर्पसफुल कार्यक्रम है, ऐसा मुझे लगता है। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन क्लब ने आज हमें ये जगह यूज़ करने के लिए दिया, इसलिए मैं उनका भी धन्यवाद करता हूँ। आप सभी यहाँ आए, मुझे लगता है कि सभी को ये लगा होगा कि वी हैव अर्न अ लॉट, काफ़ी एनरिच अपनी भी नॉलेज और मेमोरी हुई होगी, ऐसा सबको लगा भी होगा। लेकिन आप आए, इसलिए मैं आप सबका धन्यवाद देता हूँ। और इसके बाद राष्ट्रगीत होगा और फिर डिनर के बाद ही यह कार्यक्रम समाप्त होगा, बराबर है जयजीत? तो इसलिए उनका परमिशन लेकर मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि हम यहाँ समाप्त कर रहे हैं। हाँ, इसलिए मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ कि मैं थैंक यू नहीं कहता हूँ, ग्रेटिट्यूड कहता हूँ।
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा, तव शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तब जय गाथा, जन गण मंगल गायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
भारत माता की जय।